Imagine walking into a luxury car dealership, excited to buy a new ride, only to be told you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened when a towering man strolled in to look at an SUV. But here's the twist: the manager who tried to kick him out had no idea he secretly owned the entire dealership. What happened next left everyone speechless. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, now." The sharp, commanding voice sliced through the wide-open expanse of the luxury car dealership like the sudden crack of a whip. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The subtle hum of soft background music suddenly seemed too loud. Several customers turned their heads, eyes narrowing as they searched for the source of the tension. At the center of the gleaming showroom, where the polished marble floors reflected the overhead lights like a mirror, stood a tall woman in a perfectly tailored black suit. Her heels clicked decisively as she strode forward, chin lifted with authority. Every inch of her posture screamed control and confidence. This was clearly the dealership's manager, and she wasn't happy. Her focus, sharp as a laser, locked on a single man near a brand-new luxury SUV that shimmered under the spotlight. He was a towering figure, his broad shoulders stretching the seams of an immaculately tailored gray suit. His presence was undeniable, like someone who could quietly command any room he entered without uttering a word. But now, he simply stood there with calm composure, eyes steady, hands relaxed at his sides. If he felt startled or offended by the manager's harsh tone, he didn't show it. Instead, he slowly folded his powerful arms across his chest, a small, amused smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Is there a problem?" His voice rolled out deep and steady, resonant enough to be heard by everyone who had paused to watch the unfolding drama. The manager stopped just a few feet from him, her icy blue eyes narrowing. "Yes, there's a problem," she said crisply, her words clipped and impatient. "You don't look like you can afford to be here, and we don't need people loitering around. This is a high-end dealership. Our customers expect privacy and professionalism. Please leave before I call security." A collective gasp rippled through the showroom like a sudden gust of wind. Customers exchanged uneasy glances, their curiosity now fully ignited. A couple of salesmen standing near the reception desk stiffened, their smiles faltering as they shifted nervously. Even the receptionist, who had been typing away moments earlier, froze mid-keystroke. The towering man raised one thick eyebrow, his expression calm but unreadable. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to make sure he'd heard her correctly. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward. "You sure about that?" he asked at last, his voice still smooth but carrying a weight that made a few people instinctively step back. The manager's eyes hardened. She crossed her arms, mirroring his stance, though the effect was far less commanding. "I'm positive," she snapped, her tone sharpening like a knife. "This dealership is for serious buyers only. Not tourists." She tapped the pointed toe of her black heel against the glossy floor in irritation, each click echoing in the hush. A few customers looked from the imposing stranger to the manager, their faces etched with disbelief. One whispered to another, "Did she really just say that?" Another customer, an older gentleman in a navy blazer, shook his head slowly, lips pursed in quiet disapproval. Still, the towering man remained completely unshaken. His calm, almost amused smile never wavered. He shifted his weight slightly, the fabric of his suit catching the light, and took a small step closer, not aggressive, but enough to subtly remind everyone of his sheer size and presence. "I was just admiring the SUV," he said evenly. "I've been thinking about buying one, maybe a few." The manager let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Right," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm the Queen of England. Listen, I know when someone's wasting time. We have real customers to assist." The tension thickened until it felt like the entire dealership was holding its breath. Somewhere in the back, a phone camera quietly clicked on, the faint chime barely audible. Everyone knew something unusual was happening, and no one wanted to miss it. The man simply kept his gaze steady, his deep eyes glinting with a quiet confidence. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, didn't even seem offended. Instead, he let the silence do the talking, a silence that made the manager's dismissive words echo even louder in everyone's minds. And in that silence, the atmosphere shifted. What began as a simple confrontation was quickly turning into a moment no one in that showroom would forget. The entire dealership seemed to hold its breath. The manager's sharp words still hung in the air, and every person in the showroom felt the tension vibrating through the polished marble floor. The silence was so thick you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint click of a camera phone starting to record. Customers, salespeople, even a couple of kids who'd been playing near the complimentary coffee station, all of them froze, eyes locked on the towering man in the gray suit and the manager who stood defiantly before him. The man's calm composure only heightened the scene. He stood there with the patience of someone used to being underestimated, his broad frame relaxed, his deep brown eyes steady and unreadable. If he was angry, he didn't show it. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as though he were quietly weighing his next move. The faintest hint of a smile lingered at the corner of his mouth, one that said he'd seen situations like this before. Around them, the crowd's unease began to transform into curiosity. A young salesman in a navy blazer shuffled his feet nervously, glancing from the manager to the stranger. He leaned toward a coworker and whispered, "Should we, maybe ask if he needs help?" His colleague shook his head quickly, eyes wide. "Not unless you want to get dragged into this." "She looks furious." The manager's arms crossed tightly, her posture rigid as steel. She had the look of someone convinced she was in the right. "Sir," she said again, her voice lower but no less cold, "I'm giving you one last chance. This is a high-end dealership. We don't allow people to wander around unless they have an appointment or proof of serious intent to buy." The man chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the entire showroom. It wasn't mocking, just a low, warm rumble that somehow made the tension even thicker. "Ma'am," he said in that deep, resonant voice, "I was actually interested in buying this SUV. Maybe even a few others." A few customers exchanged stunned looks. One woman near the front desk raised her eyebrows as if to say, "Did he just say a few others?" Another man in a leather jacket let out a short laugh before quickly covering his mouth. The manager's eyes narrowed, her skepticism sharpening like a blade. "Right," she said, her tone dripping with disbelief. "And I'm guessing you'll be paying in magic beans?" "I've been in this business a long time, sir. I know when someone is wasting time." The man simply smiled, unbothered. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek black leather folder. His movements were deliberate, slow, as though he wanted everyone in the room to see. Without a word, he opened it and held it out toward her. The manager blinked. "What is this?" "Your library card," she said, her sarcasm cutting through the air. A couple of customers let out quiet gasps at her audacity. But before the manager could take the folder, a salesman stepped forward hesitantly, curiosity getting the better of him. "May I?" he asked. The man in the gray suit nodded, handing it to him with a calm smile. The salesman opened it and his eyes immediately widened. "Oh my," he murmured, scanning the official-looking papers. He looked up at the man, then back at the manager, his face pale with surprise. This isn't a joke. These are ownership documents." The manager blinked again, confused. "Ownership? What are you talking about?" The salesman's voice trembled slightly as he read the bold print at the top of the first page, "Property ownership transfer." His gaze darted to the name listed below. He swallowed hard. "This document shows he owns this entire dealership." A collective gasp rippled through the showroom. Several customers instinctively stepped closer to get a better look. Phones lifted higher, recording every second of the unfolding drama. The receptionist's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The manager's face drained of color. What do you mean owns the dealership?" she stammered, her voice suddenly small. She reached for the folder, but the salesman instinctively held it back, as if afraid to smudge something so important. The towering man's calm smile widened just slightly. "It's exactly what it says," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the awestruck crowd. "I bought this place. Cash." The room erupted into a low murmur of disbelief and amazement. A child whispered loudly to his mother, "Mom, he's the boss." Even the skeptical customers now looked at him with newfound respect, their earlier doubts melting away. The manager stood frozen, her confident stance crumbling under the weight of the revelation. Every pair of eyes in the dealership was fixed on her now, waiting to see what she would say or do next. The room felt as though someone had pressed the mute button on reality. For a long heartbeat, no one moved. The manager's confident facade wavered, her eyes darting between the towering man and the papers that the salesman held like a fragile relic. The once bustling dealership was now silent except for the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the distant, rhythmic tick of the service bay's clock. The salesman, still gripping the black leather folder, cleared his throat. His voice trembled as he read the bold header once again, Property Ownership Transfer Agreement. Below it, in unmistakable, neatly printed letters, was the man's name. He double-checked the seal and the official stamp, as though his mind refused to believe what his eyes were telling him. This is legitimate," he finally said, his words echoing through the showroom. "The signature is certified, and the notary's seal is right here. He really owns the entire dealership." Customers gasped audibly. Someone at the back whispered, "No way. He owns it? All of it?" A woman clasped her hand over her mouth, wide-eyed, while another customer stepped forward, craning his neck to get a closer look at the papers. A teenage boy discreetly raised his phone higher, making sure his video captured every second of the unfolding drama. The manager's face drained of color. "This must be some kind of prank," she said, her voice higher than before, tinged with disbelief. This can't be real." She reached for the folder, but the salesman instinctively stepped back, unwilling to disrupt the moment. The towering man finally broke his calm silence. He gave a small, knowing smile that softened the intensity of his presence. "It's real," he said, his deep voice steady and rich with quiet authority. "My name is Shaquille, but most people just call me Shaq. As of last week, this dealership belongs to me." A ripple of astonishment swept through the crowd. Several people gasped again, this time louder. "Shaq? The Shaq," someone whispered, though the man's confident demeanor suggested that whether they recognized him or not was irrelevant. The important fact was clear, he wasn't just a customer, he was their new boss. The manager staggered back half a step, her eyes wide as the weight of her mistake crashed down on her. I don't understand," she stammered. Why didn't I announce it the moment I walked in?" Shaq finished for her, his tone calm but edged with meaning. "Because I don't need to prove who I am to anyone. I came here today like any other person looking to buy a car. The only difference," he added, glancing around the room, "is that I happen to own the entire place." The stunned silence deepened. Employees shifted uneasily, realizing the gravity of what had just unfolded. Phones continued to record, immortalizing every second of the revelation. The manager's earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a growing dread. Everyone in the dealership now understood that the balance of power had shifted completely, and the towering man in the gray suit held it all. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the showroom lights. All eyes remained locked on the towering man who now stood not as a customer, but as the undisputed owner of the dealership. The manager's shoulders sagged, her earlier bravado slipping away like sand through her fingers. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The weight of the revelation pressed on everyone, thick as the summer heat outside. Shaq took a single step closer, his presence filling the space between them. Though his voice remained calm, it carried an unmistakable authority that demanded attention. He began, his deep tone resonating like a slow drumbeat, "I grew up learning something simple, something my mother drilled into me every day: respect everyone. Always. Doesn't matter how they look, what they wear, or what you think they can afford. Respect is free." The manager swallowed hard, her eyes flicking nervously toward the small crowd that had gathered. Customers and employees alike watched, their expressions ranging from admiration to quiet shame. A young salesman shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing he'd let his manager's words go unchallenged. Shaq continued, his gaze steady but not unkind. When I walked in here, you didn't ask how I was doing. You didn't greet me like you probably greet others. You judged me before I said a single word. Why? Because of my size? My clothes? Or maybe because you thought I didn't belong in a place like this? The manager lowered her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Shaq interrupted gently but firmly, holding her gaze. You may not have wanted to mean it, but you did. And that's the problem. It's easy to treat people with respect when you think they have money or status. The real test is how you treat someone when you don't know who they are. The crowd remained silent, hanging on every word. A father holding his young son gave a subtle nod, as if agreeing with the lesson. The boy whispered, "He's right, Dad," and his father smiled faintly. Shaq shifted slightly, his tone softening but still purposeful. I bought this dealership because I believe in opportunity. I believe everyone who walks through those doors, whether they're buying their first car or just looking around, deserves kindness. That's how I want this business to run. The manager's eyes glistened, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, she said, her earlier arrogance completely gone. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way, or to anyone. Shaq gave a slow nod. Apology accepted, he said, his expression easing into a small, reassuring smile. But remember, words are only the beginning. Actions show whether you've truly learned something. Around them, a murmur of agreement rose from the customers. The lesson hung in the air, unmistakable and unforgettable. Respect isn't earned by wealth or titles, it's something every human being deserves from the start. Shaq turned from the humbled manager to face the entire showroom, his tall frame casting a commanding presence across the polished floor. The tension that had once filled the air now shifted to a buzz of anticipation. Every customer, every salesperson, even the receptionist leaning over her desk waited for what he would say next. From today, Shaq announced, his deep voice warm but firm, this dealership will focus on people first. Respect comes before sales. Whether someone walks in wearing a suit or work clothes, whether they're ready to buy or just curious, everyone gets the same welcome. The words seemed to lift a weight from the room. A ripple of applause spread from one side of the showroom to the other. A man in a baseball cap clapped first, followed by a woman near the coffee station. Soon the entire crowd joined in, their claps echoing off the glass walls. Shaq smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. He turned back to the manager, who stood with her hands clasped in front of her, head slightly bowed. I believe in second chances, he said, his tone soft but clear. You've apologized, and I respect that. But remember, every person who walks through those doors deserves dignity. No exceptions. The manager nodded quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand. Thank you for giving me that chance. Good, Shaq said, his smile widening. Because this place isn't just about cars, it's about trust. I need a team that understands that. The crowd erupted again in supportive murmurs. One of the younger salesmen stepped forward, grinning. Welcome aboard, boss, he said, extending a hand. Shaq chuckled and gave him a firm handshake that nearly swallowed the salesman's arm. Then Shaq glanced back at the gleaming SUV that had started it all. Now, he said, flashing a grin, let's talk about buying a few of these. I've got a big family, and even bigger friends. Laughter broke out across the showroom, the earlier tension replaced by an easy camaraderie. Phones that had been raised to capture the drama now recorded smiles and cheers. In that moment, the dealership felt transformed, not just under new ownership, but with a new spirit. Customers left inspired, employees felt renewed, and the lesson of respect lingered like a bright new beginning. Respect costs nothing, but it changes everything. Shaq proved that day you should never judge a book by its cover. If you love this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another jaw-dropping tale like this one.